City of Stevens Point Bicycle and Pedestrian Street Safety Commission meeting, recorded December 2nd, 2021.
I'll call this the Bicycle and Pedestrian Street Safety Commission of Stevens Point meeting to order. Roll call.
O'Mara?
Here.
Week?
Here.
Cole? Here. Bambrock?
Here.
Rossman is absent, and Finn.
Here.
All right, we got a quorum.
Second item on the agenda is a report of the August 19th meeting of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Street Safety Commission. Are there any corrections, additions? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A discussion of the 2021 bicycle and pedestrian count.
All right, so it's been a few months now since we've last had the bike and ped count. September 15th. It's on your screen. Shows the locations that were pulled this year along with the data for this year and some comparison data from previous years. This listing is also included within the agenda packet as well, just for reference. And I also did include the link for our interactive GIS maps that show more information that was pulled at each of these locations dating back to, I believe, 2010, 2012 or so. And I guess before I kick it off to Commissioner Finn, who can provide some background information, anything that you want to touch on, I just want to give two major kudos first off. The volunteers who participated, and we had some members here in attendance today that volunteered, some present and former alders, a fair amount of university students, so definitely appreciative of all those who volunteered, because more volunteers that we have, more locations that we can pull, and that, as I mentioned in the agenda packet, this information is incredibly useful for a variety of different means for evaluating, from deciding future goals and objectives. So definitely appreciative of all those who volunteered. And then again, secondly, major kudos to Commissioner Finn for doing all the legwork, pre, post, and during the count itself. You've done a lot of work, and I'm definitely grateful for all the time and effort that you've put into it. So I'll actually kick it over to you if you wanted to provide some comments.
Probably some of you will notice something or ask about something, but I just wanted to point out a few things on the graph that looks like this, which I think you all have in front of you. I decided to add that third year. You can see in the columns just before the comments column, there's the 2021, then last year, which of course was a pandemic year. And there was no 2019 count. I believe, was that rain? Is that what happened there?
Lightning.
Yeah, lightning, yeah. So then back to 2018. Normally it's been the 2 years that were shown there, but because of the pandemic last year, I thought, well, we'll just put the one prior to that too as comparison. And of course, this other sheet too gives comparison of more years. So, quick look at that. I know that the numbers, we all notice it, but I'm pretty sure that it's been said before by staff that a change in numbers is not that huge of a deal. It still gives you a picture, especially when you look at cumulative years. It gives you a picture of it, but I think people will probably find it interesting to note that from 2018, the total of both pedestrians and bicyclists was 1,600. Of course, 2020 was a big drop. This is down at the bottom, way down the bottom there, the three columns next to the comment column. Last year, 1,215, so almost 400 fewer. And then kind of somewhere in the middle for this year, 1478. So whether that's still, and does it matter to speculate? I don't know. You know, if people still like to look at it that way, that it's still kind of, you know, is it still impacted by the pandemic or not, or does it matter? Other things that are sort of detailed, just to point out, the 3 new sites. One, the 2 we had talked about, Burlesky and EM Cups, and then the reserve, the bike contraflow and flow lanes. But the counters, Lori and Rick Walters, who were at Green Circle and Clark, they took it upon themselves to also count people who were crossing Main and Water. So that would be when you're coming out of the square. All it is, you know, then there's that island and you cross over to the riverfront there. So I thought that was really great that they counted that, because there are a lot of people, you know, oh, there is a cut through, there isn't there? Yeah, there are a lot of people that do go there, and that's never been on the list. So they counted both. So I thought that was great that they did that. So that's why a 3rd one was added. They just brought it back and said, here, we counted both intersections. And let's see, again, I don't know if this is a big deal when we all of a sudden get a big number, and sometimes the comments, the counters, will note if there were cross-country runners, because all of a sudden in a 15-minute period, there, you know, are like dozens of people that they have for their tally, and sometimes they note it, which at Maine and Michigan, they did note the cross-country runners in the comments. And these are all 15-minute increments that they're counting, so I know just what time it is that all these bunch of pedestrians came through. North Point in Michigan, I should have called the counters there. I actually thought about it, and then I think that it just left my mind. Because there too, it was pretty high.
Cross-country.
Yes,
There,
and
too.
so I'm thinking that too as a cross-country team there, because at 4 o'clock, between 4 and 4:15, they had a total of 81 pedestrians, and that's way up north. So one thing that next year I could just ask volunteers that have those, or any of the intersections, just mention maybe if that is important. I don't know if it is, to mention if it is a team of runners that comes through. Other notations I have there. I'm not sure. I'd like to suggest, or at least to talk about it, do we need somebody way south on West River Drive in HH that has, you can see the past 3 counts, 16. So that's the second one from the top. 23, 35. I don't know city, as far as the city, why would that be, and I'm just tossing out, or why is that an important intersection to count, and do the low numbers actually tell you anything? So there's just one other thing. Burlesky and EM Cops, I know you suggested, no, that was Scott, yeah, that you suggested that, and that's real low numbers too.
Well,
Is that,
well, I was just thinking about this. How do we pick a time to do this? Because when I commute to work, I commute between 7 and 9:30, and that's when I see people going to AIG, to
Yes.
Skyward, to Pizza Ranch. There's somebody that he rides every day, and then, you know, a handful of people I see, but it's not till 6 o'clock. I mean, it's hard to pick a time
Yeah.
that would be accurate, because, I mean, like I go through Patch and Patch in the Green Circle. I know a lot of people. Tom O'Malley goes through there in the morning. I mean, I see a lot of people. I pass probably 6 or 7 people in the morning going through Iverson and coming up to Patch Street. I've always wondered about that with accounts, but you know,
Yeah.
it's hard to
The
justify.
classic, the classic count timing is 16 hours.
Right.
And we don't do them for the pedestrian counts, but if we have a place where we see that stuff, we can talk to our local DOT office And they do have an automated counter for pedestrians and bicycles.
You know that we have counters on the green circle.
Yeah.
You should see the data that, I mean, I could give you on, you know, the most popular section is the McDill Pond area. I mean, it's huge. You know, that, we could pull data from this day. I could pull data from that just to have that, you know, extra too, when we do that next time.
Or we could ask to borrow one if we think that we're getting people going
Yeah.
into the business park, that we could put a counter out there for 2
Yeah,
days.
I mean, it picks up walkers, runners, bikers,
Yeah.
large animals.
Or you could just project if you have what our count is, and then you see what
Right,
full
right.
day count, you can just say, well, you know, we're getting about 10% or 30% or whatever it is. Yeah, and just to address the time, that was in the window that the national organization
Right,
recommended.
right.
You know, we were thinking more in terms of the center city area where you get more school traffic and university
Yeah.
traffic, but I realize the working people out on the fringes.
Yeah, because I always wonder, like, if we're using this to help with the projects that we have, and you want, you know, you would hope that the numbers are realistic, too. And it all
Maybe-
depends on weather and everything. It can be skewed a little bit.
Yeah, and maybe to piggyback on your comment, is there, and just something to speak on behalf of the commission, is there interest in either next year or down the road doing either a targeted morning count or expanded some way to include some locations that are pulled during morning hours, 9, 10, 11
Right.
o'clock, to see, you know, is there comparable data that's being pulled, that's being collected, say, at the 9, 10 o'clock hour versus the, you know, in this case, the 3, 4, 5 o'clock hour?
Or
Just,
we could try for the PM peak, which would be nice, because we're already starting the count, and we just extend those counts by 3 hours. And because the AM and the PM peak are usually equal.
Are still gonna come through, yeah.
yeah.
And that may be a way to do it. And I think you'd want to target it, because it's a manpower deal, or woman power.
And I feel like too, you know, if you target some of these areas, either both morning and evening or just in the morning, I think that my guess is there's some areas that would have higher foot traffic in the morning than during the 3, 4, 5 o'clock hour. I'm thinking, my guess is probably around the university. There may be some locations that would have more foot traffic
Right.
at 9, 10 o'clock than what there would at 4, 5. At least, just from my experience, classes predominantly are done with at the 4 or 5 o'clock hour versus 9 and 10, so.
I concur with that. I was talking about specifically with the business park.
Okay.
You could catch it with a PM peak real nice.
Yeah, if you had that long, the
If you just
bigger
elongate
window,
that,
right.
and then you have the advantage of seeing what the other one was,
Mhm.
and you only set up once.
Yeah, but I agree, you could go morning or afternoon, but just expand that because, you know, some people get off at 3 o'clock from work, some people get off at 5:30 to 6 o'clock or, you know, and then they're passing through, you know, between 6 and 6:30. So it's a balancing act, trying to decide.
And that's something if collectively as a commission, you're in favor of, you know, we could, for next year, try to target some volunteers either more aggressively or a little bit sooner to try to get more, because ultimately, the more locations that we poll and the more, and the time intervals that we poll each location are going to be indicative on how much volunteer support that we have. So, you know, maybe that's something that we could take a look at for next
Yes,
year.
I think sooner especially. It was a little bit of a scramble this year. I also, you know, was wondering, even myself, I emailed people that volunteered last year, only people that volunteered last year, and the 2018 list that I'd gotten from Bill, I used that for last year, but then only used those that volunteered for last year. And I realized I should not have done that because there are some people that could make one year but couldn't make the next. So the mailing list got truncated more than it should have. And I've already made a note to myself, you know. And then also you had put it on, you started putting it then on some social media too. So I think sooner, so that there isn't the scramble for finding counters, especially if we're gonna add any periods. Extending a single period probably isn't a big deal, but if we're going to have some afternoon and some morning, if there would be that for a few places, then, yeah, well, the effort to
That's something
recruit
that
volunteers, it has to be more dynamic.
we can reach out to the university too. Maybe, you know, at least as a college student, maybe there's some of these locations at or around campus that would be more of interest to them, just
Well, they
since
are,
it's
and we
within walking
do
distance.
through some professors that have worked with us. The problem is, they don't start school till after Labor Day. So can't contact them, and so we'd have to start doing stuff prior to that also, and then include the professors. But this year seemed to be even more of a crunch. I don't know why. I don't know if they started a little later, or if the count was a little bit, I know it's always the same Wednesday, but for the students too, it seemed to be a little more of a crunch. And the professors, you have to count on them to forward the prepared email that I have for them with all the information and the registration, you know, the Google form.
I'm wondering
So it
if
gets a little, you know,
sometimes,
short time
depending
for
where
them.
Labor Day falls, sometimes it's that third week of class, and maybe was it the second week of class this year?
Labor Day was late.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it
that's
might-
what happened.
There might have been
Okay.
less time.
I know that there was more of a crunch with the students.
Yeah, that was probably
And I
it.
started everything then. So I think we can promote to the community
Sooner, yeah.
and then bring in the students when school starts again. But that's,
Yeah, I know I was out of state when this happened this year, but like, I'd be more able to do a morning versus an afternoon if I, you know, to help
Yeah.
on the next year.
yeah, so we'll just,
And to your thing about, you know, West River Drive and HH, for instance, I can't imagine anything we would do to accommodate pedestrians at this point. Everything's been built. You know, West River Drive, there's no place we can put a sidewalk in there.
No.
We're stuck.
Yeah, the Green Circle Trail.
Comes out there.
Comes off the bridge and goes
Yeah.
west across the intersection there.
so that's why I've actually gotten feedback from the people who I've placed there. Like, not so sure why we need to be here. So
Yeah.
that got me thinking, and why I wanted to bring it
And
up
so I think
too.
that that's
Is
something
that a
for us to
necessary
consider.
spot?
And I think the consideration would be is there anything we'd ever do different because of
Yes.
that?
Yeah, what's the ultimate reason for having anybody at any of the intersections?
But, you know, a lot of these other ones, although they're low, you can understand, if things started to change, or you might put in pedestrian crossing striping perhaps.
Yep.
Maybe to expand on that a little further, are there any locations that were pulled last year that you think next year down the road that we should take off the list?
Well, that's what
or
I'm suggesting with West River Drive.
in addition to West River and HH?
That was the only one, except for the Burlesque and EM cops, or that I brought up, but then you justified that and why we should continue that. And we only did it the 1 year. I don't know what others think about any there, but I thought all the others seemed justified, but
What was the
part of it.
I'm not
justification for, the justification for Berlowski and cops?
Just because of how that's growing out there, and there are a lot of people moving around, and it's tough to decide, because you have people from the Conifer subdivision that come over the railroad tracks. You've got runners, walkers, bikes. I would probably say more bikes are coming underneath the highway, though, on the, on that trail.
maybe though that's the same issue that Mike brought up. What more would be done there if we realize, are there improvements that can be done there? And if there aren't, if it's not anything that the planning office or, development would be considering as road construction continues, maybe we don't need.
I mean, unless a neighborhood gets built to the east,
Yes.
where all the, the infrastructure got put underground years ago, I don't think a count probably has to be done again there until something
Yeah, I
happens.
think that's fine. I think from year to year, we can
Yeah.
decide,
Mhm.
well, now would be the time to see what we have.
Yeah.
I think part of the reason for those outlying areas is just to show that people still do walk and bike from further distances.
Right.
Yes.
There aren't as many as you would expect.
And that's been one of my, well, back when I was on this group, when it first started, was the city is a lot bigger than just
Yeah.
downtown.
Right.
And, you know, I hear a lot being in the bicycle industry about, you know, things getting done. One of the, I live on Frontenac, so I'm between Jordan and Simonis. And when my wife and I, we walk or we bike over to the reserve, we cross at Indiana by Ellistone Construction. That's a tough place to cross there, but a lot of people use it. I mean, there's always somebody crossing there. So, I mean, places like that, if they qualify, I mean, it still takes a long time to get across Stanley Street.
Yeah, Asher, I'd
That could
concur
be a
with
good
that.
place.
Yeah, because if I walk
Yeah.
over to, I live in your neighborhood, of
Okay.
course, because I think I'm your older person then.
Yep.
If you cross, exactly as you say, if you cross Stanley from Indiana, there's really no good place to cross to get over to Schmeekly.
That would be a good count.
Yeah,
Place
and-
to-
and the-
to
and the-
count.
Yeah.
And now that Scott, that you were talking about, Lime Bill too, you said that maybe there isn't anything wrong with counting those outlying areas just for, just to know.
If you
just
have manpower, yeah.
Yeah.
Just to know, and when you spoke of sort of the expansion of bike and pedestrian travel, that there are people there,
Well-
yeah, maybe we don't, it doesn't necessarily have to apply itself
I think
to
we should
an
also-
ultimate goal.
We should also look to the automated, see if we can borrow some
Right.
automated counters. Because they can pretty much tell what's going on. The ones on Green Circle, they count, and they do well. And especially on these outlying ones, it wouldn't be a bad idea. And from time to time, the DOT will lend you them. You get a hourly printout on how many people passed, whatever point you have it set at.
But the outlying ones have less traffic.
Right. Well, it depends on where it is. Like, you know, where I work in the business park, I had to go to Minnesota on Tuesday and came back late, and we were sitting there waiting for the light to turn as we got off the highway on HH to go back east. And here's a pedestrian walking down the middle between all the lanes to go towards Starbucks and everything. And bikers out there, I mean, there's a lot of people walking across the interstate. You know, there's places like that, you know, what could we do to, I mean, there's no sidewalk going down to Hoover on HH on either side there. I know one side's Plover, one side's Stevens Point, so I don't know if that's a tough thing to
Yeah, it is.
do. But, you know, I always think we're lucky that maybe no one's gotten hit out there. It's,
The other thing is having those ramps there, it's hard to cross a ramp for pedestrians, have a hard time crossing.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, as an experienced cyclist, if I'm doing a long commute to work and I decide I need to hightail it across and I take HH, you know, you take your own life into your hands there. Because then you have to merge across to make the left turn into the business park.
I would say for sure, main and water, piggybacking what you mentioned before, Commissioner Finn, I think that would be something I would
that
like to
one.
keep that, just since that's kind of in the heart of our downtown targeted area master plan, that having subsequent years of information would bode well should there be any future actions taking place in that area. But I guess, is there any other
The
comments?
Indiana and
Yeah.
Stanley?
Yeah.
I did want to comment on Reserve Street, because with the new counterflow bike lanes, just to see if there is increased bicycle traffic at the places where those lanes are. So I might even suggest that pick either end of Reserve, either the Main Street end or the Clark Street end, and just treat it as a regular count site there and see what that looks like. But I suspect over time, that there'll be more bicycle traffic on that, and then it'll take away from either end. It'll take away from the Main Street end, or the Division Street end, or the Michigan Street end, as people realize it's easier to get through in the middle there.
I ride Michigan now that it's got bike lanes. It's a lot better than, coming underneath the railroad tracks from Patch, and then usually I'd go take a right on Dixon Street. Now I just go all the way to Price, and then turn into my neighborhood, and it flows really good.
Bill, were you talking about the contraflow?
Yeah, I was.
That we counted? Yes, didn't do the intersection. It might have been my misunderstanding of what you wanted me to do. I just had them stand in the middle and only count bikes, because I thought your real interest was because that's a brand-new
Yeah, well, I mean,
painted
that's fine.
facility. Yeah, so then we should change that to maybe reserve in Maine?
Probably Maine, yeah.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
That's right by PJ's, right?
Well, it's
Reserve in
right by Old Main,
Old Maine,
Oh,
yeah, block.
and you'll get pedestrians going
reserve.
both ways
And
there.
therefore count pedestrians and
Plus,
cyclists.
I think with the bike lanes on Main now, that's a pretty safe place to bicycle. You might be finding people are more comfortable on Main than they ever were before.
Well, let's keep this discussion in mind. We will be revisiting this when it's 80 degrees.
Right.
Yeah, we'll for sure have another discussion on this before, probably in the spring, early summertime, so.
Great.
Next item on the agenda is a discussion on the 2021 walking and rolling audit.
All right, just to give a brief background, the last time that we met as a commission, August 19th, is when we had the walking and rolling audit of Plan 2022 street reconstruction. So on the screen and within the agenda package shows the streets that are planned for 22 reconstruction, plus additional street segments that could be included as part of an expanded project. So the purpose of this meeting today is to kind of do more of an evaluation of the segments that we walked and biked, using some of the indicators that AARP has in their walk audit toolkit. So the first section that I'd like to address, and this can be probably more of a rapid fire amongst the 5 commissioners, is to rate the 6 bullet point items that you see on the screen, either poor, fair, good, and excellent, depending on how the extent that this area is, as a whole, is deemed pedestrian friendly and safe. So we'll start with crossing streets and intersections. I think the biggest areas that will come into play here would be Washington and Second. Let's see, Smith and Portage were some of the bigger ones, but we can start with Commissioner Finn. Excellent, good, fair, or poor?
For Washington and Second?
Just overall, I'd say.
Oh, all of the intersections.
Yeah, just
but
an
starting,
overall.
starting at Second Street.
Correct.
Uh,
Note that map is included, I believe, in the agenda packet as well, if you need a page 25.
I remember last year when we had to rate them, and I was always higher than everybody else, so, I don't know. I'm like, well, this is fine. We can
As
cross
long
the
as you're
street.
consistent, we can average out with it using statistics.
So now I'm like, I have to go first. The intersections, I guess fair.
Fair. Okay, Fehrenbach?
So this is based on what we observed in August? Because I wasn't able to be part of the audit,
Or I guess what you observed driving or biking or walking yourself. It doesn't have to be exactly during this meeting if you weren't, or during
Okay,
the
well,
August date.
I would say fair.
Fair. Omer?
I would say all of them are fair. It's sort of a universal deal is they really, in that whole area, the access for people with disabilities is tough. You know, the curb ramps aren't particularly great. And there's a lot of foliage that's blocking sight on the intersections that can make it tough for motor vehiclists to see the pedestrians or bicycles, and bicycles. And that would be my observation of this whole area.
Okay. Alder Leek?
Yeah, I think I mean, I would say fair as just my rating, but I think when it comes to the access with wheelchairs, the one thing I did note is that you immediately fall off the sidewalk or get pulled towards the street when you're in the wheelchair. So, but that's the sidewalk, not the intersections. So, again, fair.
And Cole?
Fair.
All right, next topic point will be sidewalks. We'll just go back to Commissioner Flynn.
I'm trying to remember, and I am familiar with the area too. Yes, with the exception of some things that were pointed out. I guess it would be between fair and poor. There are some raised, some raised
There's some root issues there,
blocks
right?
and root and the width. I believe sidewalks on the reconstructs are wider now, aren't they?
5 feet, I believe.
Yeah. So especially if we have in mind what updated sidewalks, what they look like and that they are wider. I would imagine that, again, that for wheelchairs, having them as narrow as they are. So I guess I'll keep that a little lower, somewhere between poor and fair.
Fair.
Omer?
All the sidewalks are in need of being replaced. Repair and replace won't work there because the grade needs to be changed on a lot of these to make them work. Both from draining back into the properties and side slope for people in wheelchairs. And we got these roots pushing up sidewalks so that we have trips. Well, all those, you gotta tear it out to redo it right. And so I don't think there are any sidewalks here that are salvageable for remove and replace.
So overall, would it be a poor or a fair or a good?
In need of replacement, which is
Okay.
usually poor.
Okay.
That's what I was getting at, is
Perfect.
there's nothing that I would keep.
But that's also a given in the whole reconstruct of
Yeah.
the street.
Not necessarily. Once in a while, they look at it and they say, oh, this block looks pretty good. All we'll do is there are 2 slabs that are bad, and then we'll keep going. And I don't think there were many places that was anything like that.
Right.
But they're moving the sidewalks, so, I'm not sure what the phrase would be, sliding them over a bit. So they're definitely all gonna get replaced,
Actually, I
right?
don't think they'll be sliding the sidewalk, because the sidewalk is always on the property line.
Okay.
They move the curbs.
Oh, I see. Oh, yes, right, and then add the
Yeah, Terrace.
grass, the terrace, yeah, okay, that's
tree
true.
lawn,
Yeah.
boulevard, there are all sorts of nice names.
All right, Alder Leek?
Well, I mean, it's possible to walk there, so I'll say fair, though, yes, in need of replacement. And the wheelchair situation is interesting.
All right, Cole?
I would say poor to fair. Just doesn't seem like there's any consistency among the different surfaces and at the intersections. You would cross one way at one and a different way at another.
Okay. All right, next one is driver behavior. During our audit a few months ago, it is, naturally a little bit different given that some of the intersections have been currently under reconstruction, so naturally the amount of traffic is not as significant back in August as what it is normally. So, for this one, I would say just, anecdotal evidence that you remember biking, walking, driving past. What are your thoughts on driver behavior?
And really, the only busy street is Second, and that's just part of that intersection. So I think there's, for one thing, just ample opportunity for drivers to be aware. I would say good, with the exception of maybe Second Street, people might not be as aware. But that's, well, it's a total of 2 intersections, I guess, or second crossings.
I will generalize to that part of town. In general, I found that driver behavior there is good compared to other parts of the city, because it's a pretty dense neighborhood. People seem to be more respectful of children at play and things like that, so I'd say good.
Okay. Mary?
It is pretty good, and one thing is that the speeds are down in this area vis-à-vis other parts of the city. And so I don't see where any of these streets is really a candidate for any traffic calming measures.
Okay. Leak?
Yes, they're good.
And Cole. Good. Perfect. Next up is safety. Commissioner Finn?
And here we're talking about all along the route, not just intersections, correct?
Correct.
Just picturing the old streets and the old sidewalks, and I believe there's parking along Washington and Portage and Smith.
And I would say one example, maybe to deem whether an area, a stretch of sidewalk is safe or not, that's not within an intersection, could be is the sidewalk at grade with the neighboring driveway? There's a couple, I believe during our audit, there were a couple instances where the driveway was elevated a little bit from the sidewalk, which could
So we're
naturally.
focusing on the sidewalk, not necessarily if bikers are on the street or
It would be for bikers too on the street, but just as an example of a
And I don't remember that, so as far as safety, anytime there are cars parked on the road, that can be an issue. I'll say good.
Okay. Fahrenbach?
There.
There.
It's acceptable. The two things I think we're looking at is having some vegetation, having blind spots, both at intersections, and there's some driveways that are steep and are blind. And we should look at that when we're going through. In fact, there were some places where you could even get a code guy out there today and cut down some limbs and stuff.
Yep.
But that's the only real safety issue I see is lack of sight distance in some parts.
Yeah, we did talk, I remember, about our vision triangles, how much of a clear view is needed along 2 street intersections. Fencing is something that's pretty good, that we regulate anytime folks get a fence permit. Landscaping would be another, that there's that constant enforcement of it, so. Alder Leak?
That's like good.
And Cole? Here. Alright. And then next up, second from the end, is comfort and appeal for both bicyclists and pedestrian. So Commissioner Finn?
Fair.
Yeah. Fahrenbach?
Fair.
O'Meara?
It's good. I like it. It's a tight neighborhood that has sidewalk for everybody, and they're relatively low vehicle count lanes. It's a place that I could see living in. Maybe not every house looks like a house I'd want to live in, but that's okay. But I like it. I think that this is approaches new urbanism if the stuff was brought up to standard.
Okay. Alder Leak?
Say good.
And Cole?
Fair.
All right. And then lastly, overall impressions, ratings, observations of the route. Commissioner Finn?
Somewhere between fair and good, I guess the average.
Okay. Fahrenbach?
I would say fair.
O'Meara?
Old and in need of upgrade.
It's not one of the choices.
But
I know, I
that really
understand.
says what it is.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing particularly bad when they designed it. It was the state of the art.
Oh, so, yeah, fair to good. Yes, certainly in need of replacement, but there's nothing, I concur, there's nothing especially wrong with it, except the road's getting old.
Okay, and Cole?
Yeah, fair to good.
Perfect. All right, so those were our rapid fire questions. Now we have a couple of more open-ended, and I won't ask each individual commissioner to provide their thoughts on it, so we'll just keep it up for a general discussion. So first question is, what kind of road users did you see? AARP gives examples of ages, levels of mobility, and ways at getting around. Wheelchairs, walkers, bicyclists, skateboards, baby strollers. So I think outside of the traditional bicyclists, pedestrians, are there any other forms of transportation that folks saw either during the audit or in the past through biking and walking there?
I would say you do see all of those that they listed. I mean, it's quite a variety.
Okay. All right. Number two, overall, what did you see that works well for this region in terms of bicycle and pedestrian accommodations?
Well, sidewalks exist. That's not true everywhere.
Well, exactly. That's a very valid point. At least they're there.
Yeah.
And I think we want to look at street width through the whole corridor. We have some areas that it's too large. I don't know if we have any that it's too narrow. But we should look at that because those little narrower street widths improve the quality of life and that the snow isn't pushed up onto your sidewalk. You have more airspace in front of your house. And the traffic is slowed down. But then the trade-off is you might only have parking on one side, but, we have Ellis Street that we put in that has a very compact street section, and it works pretty well. And it's a street that's used for more than just local access. So that's the only thing I'd say is look at the street widths.
Okay. Any other comments for this one? All right. The opposite of that, what do you see that needs improvement? And we did touch on some of these already, but I guess anything else that comes to mind?
Well, yeah, as I said, the wheelchair, the disability access
Okay.
is a definite, I think, big priority.
Okay. Perfect.
I think there's some
Pavement
drainage issues on it,
transitions.
but I don't know if that's pedestrian.
What was that?
There's some drainage issues in that area, but I don't know that that's pedestrian.
Well, it is, because like, before we had swales put into my house, there was this giant lake in front of my,
I can understand, but I'm saying in that area, I didn't see any place that anyone's going ankle deep,
oh, okay.
which is always a good, once it goes over the boots, then it's a problem.
Mm-hmm. All right. Any other comments for this one? All right. Did anybody see any specific perils for pedestrians? Any glaring red flags that you see during the audit or casually that you see for this area?
I thought there was an example that maybe you pointed out or somebody else did where, I don't know if it was a planter or there's some landscaping that was in the way of.
Right by the sidewalk.
Of improving the sidewalks.
Yeah.
And, having to deal with the owners of the property to get that fixed, but, that was.
I will say you do see that, fairly often, even outside of this scope area where vegetation hangs over the
Right.
sidewalk that,
Yeah.
especially for wheelchair accommodations, it could be prove difficult.
And children on bicycles who are on the sidewalk, those kinds of things
Mhm.
can be
Babies and
dangerous.
strollers.
Those walls that are right next to the sidewalk or shrubs that are right next to the sidewalk.
So when hedges grow over the sidewalk, whose responsibility is that when the sidewalk goes from good width to hardly any width
Mhm.
in the city?
Yeah, so as far as any changes in width, that's something that the Public Works Department would reach out to them and have that discussion. Cases where there's no changes happening to a sidewalk, but there's vegetation that's overhanging, then that's something where, I would reach out.
This is no good. That's my son,
Wow.
Between
the
myself,
fortunate son.
Your son calling.
between myself and then the neighborhood improvement coordinator, Mark Cordes, both of us would be sending letters and
Right.
asking them to trim down their vegetation.
Yeah, my wife said I couldn't go out in our neighborhood with a cordless hedge trimmer and take care of it in the dark. I've thought about it many times, especially
At least
after,
not during the daytime.
Especially
City
when you
Forestry
are-
Department.
after a surgery or something and you're just getting back to walking and that, it's pretty tough when it narrows up.
Awesome. Next item is listing the biggest priority areas for improvement. So, I would say, I would include both the streets that are planned and the potential streets as part of an expanded project. Within that scope, what are the specific areas that would have a greater need of priority than others? So, one example could be, we talked about the intersection of Washington and Second in
Yeah, I was
terms
just gonna
of
say that.
sidewalk in terms of crossing the street. But are there any other priority areas that come to mind? And if so, what would be the particular improvement?
Alder Leak mentioned the
Yeah, there's the
wheelchair
grade of the
access.
sidewalk, yeah.
Those are, kind of a universal concern.
Okay.
And then I believe in the reconstruct, the plan is to narrow the street, to slow down traffic. So that seems like a positive thing.
All right, next up is listing the easy fixes. So AARP has some examples being repairing broken pavement on a sidewalk, which we mentioned. So, what are some easy fixes in your eyes that wouldn't take an exorbitant amount of funds, time to repair, et cetera?
I think the only thing is trimming of vegetation.
Okay.
That may or may not be easy, depending upon who you're dealing with, but
True. Okay, and then the difficult fixes. So the example they give is moving a telephone pole that obstructs at or near a sidewalk. I believe there were at least one or two examples that I recall from a few months ago where that was the case, but
But that's simple. If you're gonna do a reconstruction, you tell them to move, and they do. You just, they get a free permit to be on the right-of-way in exchange for behaving themselves.
I know one example that Director Badoon mentioned is, for some of these intersections, trying to, so some of the intersections currently, you have a curb ramp where the accessible route is when crossing an intersection doesn't come at a straight line. It kind of comes angled where you have to go enter into the intersection in order to hook up onto the adjacent sidewalk. So, that could be another example where.
But if you're reconstructing, that's what you're gonna do. It's no harder to design it up to speed now. When they put the curb ramps in, they were retrofitting. You're not retrofitting, you can do anything you want to.
So I would say like narrowing the street to calm traffic is a difficult fix unless you're doing a total reconstruct, which is why it's so important to do those things when you can, because the opportunities don't come along that often.
Utilities, depending on the exact case, could be.
Yes.
Awesome. I guess before we wrap up this item, any other last minute comments, thoughts, questions regarding the walk and rolling audit?
What is anticipated as far as the likelihood of this other segment being done with this one?
Yeah,
Do you know?
that I personally don't know, but that's something I can reach out to Director Badoon and see if it's finalized.
I believe it said not part of the budget, but that they would like to get it done. Maybe it's dependent on monies that are left over from this summer. I'm not sure if
It
the
has to
city
do
can
with.
do that.
It really has to do with gasoline and oil prices.
Okay.
That will, dictate bid prices.
Expense, yeah.
And if the bids come in lower, then you can do it.
Okay. Has all the work on the other streets on the north side been completed as of this point, from this summer? I know there was some of the streets and intersections were taking a little longer than they thought, but do you know if that got finished?
Yeah, I know the section, just anecdotal evidence from driving around, I know the section by MEJ's, I believe they're still
Is-
working on
Oh, a little
that,
bit, but at least you can go through there now. I
Yeah.
did notice that.
As
yeah.
far as the other, it's been at least, I think, a week since I've been out in that area, but that's something I can definitely reach out
Well,
to.
just curious, because
Scott, too.
hopefully they can get it all done. I know that, that the staff was just kind of wondering and hoping that with other supply chain problems and shortages, that they could still get it done by.
And hopefully the
before
weather
winter.
cooperates
Yeah.
like it is right now, but
Yeah.
awesome. So I guess we can go on to the next
Okay.
item.
We're going to discuss the educational initiatives for the clearance of snow from curb cuts.
All right, so I believe we brought this conversation up earlier in the year, last year, but I believe during late January, early February is when we began having some stakeholder meetings between city staff, some members of the commission, Commissioner Finn, former Commissioner Lane Brown was on, attended those meetings, some other advocates here in the city as to have a collective discussion as to what are ways that we could better incentivize property owners to clear the snow from their curb cuts that adjoin their property. So as I mentioned in the agenda packet, there is no legal obligation in our code of ordinances to require the snow to be removed. Now there is, of course, for the clearing of snow and ice off of sidewalks, and they're given X amount of time depending on if there's a boulevard or not. But ultimately, making sure that snow and ice is cleared from curb cuts is more of an educational initiative to try to, as I said, incentivize folks to maintain their curb cuts if it applies in that case. So I wanted to have this discussion for this meeting just since we've had maybe 2 snowfalls so far. I think now is a good time to have a broader conversation. Is there certain initiatives that staff should focus on in terms of spreading the awareness so that we can target now before any more significant snowfall comes in. So what I wanted to spend this meeting on is, first outline some of the thoughts and ideas that came out of these meetings and after those meetings, and then secondly, to kind of have a broader conversation amongst the commission. Is there any other, as to if there's any other actions that city staff or we as a commission could do. So one of the ideas actually that myself and Neighborhood Improvement Coordinator Mark Cordes and I have been discussing is more of a targeted mailer campaign, so to speak, where you would target certain corridors of the city that either from anecdotal evidence that there's been issues in the past where you can see an accumulation of snow and ice. And what we would do is send out mailers essentially saying, hey, we're asking you to clear snow and ice from your curb cuts. You're not required to, but here are the reasons why it's beneficial. And the purpose of this is to send it to these property owners and then evaluate and measure compliance throughout the summer, throughout the winter rather. And if, for example, there's certain areas where there's habitually that same issue that comes about, then sending a second mailer, potentially having a phone conversation just to again spread that awareness could be an option. I know one of the areas that Mr. Cordes and I have been mentioning that would at least be of interest would be that stretch of Maria Drive, essentially between 2nd Street and Madison. There's a few streets that intersect, especially given given the adjacent school, there's a fair amount of foot traffic during the winter months, that could be an option, but I'm just curious to see it, first off, your thoughts on it, and then, if you're generally in support of it, what are some areas, what are some street segments here in the city that you think would benefit having this targeted mailer campaign?
See, I like the idea of the targeted mailer campaign, and I would have two minutes. I'd do it for clearing the snow off the crosswalks, or off the, at the curb cuts. But also, I would include hydrants in there. The reason is we want people to do it, and some people who will think that that's really important might think, oh yeah, maybe the curb cut's important, because they think they drive all the time, but all of them are afraid of their houses burning down, or their insurance rates going up, one or the other. And so I would put them sort of together. This is the time to, and you have to shovel your sidewalks. But then I would have it, why it's important. You said the reasons, and talk about how you just take away mobility from all sorts of people who really need it.
And creating danger if somebody has to go out in the street in order
Yeah.
to, like cutting out at a driveway because they see that they can't get through
Oh, yeah.
the
No,
curb cut, then they have to go out in the street, whether you're on bike, because some bicyclists come up on the street in the winter or on the sidewalk in the winter if the streets aren't clear, or even walkers, then you're going out on the street, bypassing it and then coming back in.
no,
So
there are good
the danger
reasons.
that creates could be another
Yeah,
incentive.
there are real good reasons why to do it, and we should.
Make it
And
clear to
then we're
them.
gonna talk about clearing. And I think we say, we really want you to clear. And besides that, if your neighbor is shoveling his or her sidewalk by hand and you have a snow blower, maybe as a good citizen, you'd go down to the end and clear that curb cut out. Say that, try to get this citizenship deal, because it isn't a huge, it's not fun, but it's not as big a deal. It could be impossible for someone to do with a snow shovel. But with a snow blower, you can get through there. And I think that we have to talk about that it isn't just in front of your house, you're part of a community. And that's one of the things for us to think about.
Any other?
I might add that as a targeted mailing, I don't know if you would have access to this, but in the central city, it seems like a lot of student rentals happen to be on corners, and they tend not to get their curb cuts shoveled. So maybe a targeted mailing to
The
rental
owners.
property owners to say, please consider also shoveling out or plowing out.
Yeah, and that is something that, with the snow abatement procedures that are in place within, I believe it's chapter 13, chapter 13, that, we naturally have a database where it shows properties that have had abatement measures for their sidewalks. Now, I think that's something where we could do a query to filter out those at our corner lots to see, are there multiple issues, multiple violations within the same calendar year, and then if it also stems with the issue of clearing snow and ice from curb cuts, that's something that we could address too. Any other comments or?
So I guess, there'd be a few so-called safety measures too, if you're thinking of, how do we promote it to them for the safety of those who use your sidewalk, and for the safety of the neighborhood, and if you're gonna have the same mailer talk about hydrants, I'm not sure. Just to appeal to them that way also.
And something about, if you're mad that the mail's coming late, when the postman can't walk on the sidewalk because it isn't cleared, you might wait even longer.
And are there
That's
any?
just an editorial.
Sure. Any additional areas that you think in the city, just from your past experience, that has issues with snow and ice building up I'm thinking,
I think all along Division Street, and those guys
Just
just
an
have
accident, yep.
they just have a tough time
No place to put it.
clearing anyway, because there's just no place to put the snow. But I think that, and that would go to, when we're picking up snow in that area, that we make sure we pick it up off the whole crosswalk. As long as we're in there picking it up, we can go around and get the curb cut with the city machines.
Where are they gonna dump snow now that North Side Yard is built in? They used to dump it in the river,
Yeah, that's so
couldn't do that
close.
anymore. And then they started piling it on that block.
Yeah, boy, that's,
You
yeah,
know where
that
they're
I
gonna go?
personally don't know.
yeah.
There's the spot, Green Avenue, if you go north on no, not north, east on Green Avenue, or east of Green Avenue,
Where's
is it
Green?
East Maria Drive, I
East
believe?
Maria.
Yeah,
Oh, dead
yeah,
ends to the
yeah,
highway.
Yeah, just south of, Crete.
that's right. That's where I think they're dumping now.
It's huge, yeah, they've
Yeah.
been doing it for quite a while.
All right.
It looks like a mountain range in
Yeah,
there.
I mean, later in the year it will.
Okay. I guess then, just a broader conversation amongst the commission. Are there other initiatives or actions that you think would be better suited to address this concern and issue?
I think, and we should probably be doing it every year, have some sort of public service announcement, have them, ask the mayor to put it into his, TV show, just to get it out there. If we could have someone write a little article and get it to our local media, the city reminds you that this is something that's important.
I think it's good that everybody hear about it, not just those who have,
Yeah.
who live at a corner too. So, the media, this was at the end of the winter last year, near the end of the winter when we were talking about it. And I think Mayor Weeza, he got in one, thing about, shovel your,
It's a Game of Thrones reference.
yeah, that's right. I was trying to think, I know it's some goofy thing. And that was, pretty much it. And then probably after that, spring came, I don't know. But it wasn't very timely because it was at the end. But yeah, blurbs in the newspaper and social media and radio.
And the television is coming down here regularly. If you tell them, we'd like you to come down here, we'll discuss this, with someone from DPW or with code enforcement, they might come for that. As soon as there is a snowstorm coming, they might think that this is sort of neat.
And also, it involves any community,
Yeah.
the TV news, they're people from the region that watch. It's not just a single community. It's time now to keep your curb cuts clean for safety.
I just think, people are getting, I don't want to say lazy, but it seems like since we're walking more in our neighborhood, there's more sidewalks that have snow on it for more than 48 hours, even longer. Then it ices over and you get the post holes in it from, freezing. And I used to do half my block around Simonis for our good neighbors that lived there before they moved, and I still go up and down if I'm out there with the snow blower.
Well, and you said that more and more people are walking, but that also is what can create the problem because it gets packed down before somebody gets home from work in order to shovel it. And then you go, well, I can't shovel it now, it's all packed down. So it's a dilemma for a lot of homeowners too. How do I keep
Right.
up on this when I have to work and I don't get home until evening and it's packed down?
Especially after a big snow, you get out there early in the morning and you clear it, then the snow plows come through 2 or 3 times
Yes.
before you get home from work, and you have to have a snow blower or a plow because some of that stuff you can't move once it freezes.
Yeah.
It's tough.
Okay. Any other last minute items to address? Awesome. And we'll kick it off to the next one.
Now, we'll go to the staff updates.
All right, we got the first one with the walk-friendly community application. I know I mentioned this a couple times, still waiting to hear back our results, and unfortunately, it got delayed a little bit more. So I think we were supposed to learn by, I believe it was October or November, maybe. But unfortunately, it looks like it's going to be spring of 2022 when we find out. But nonetheless, whatever our end result will be, if we get a honorable mention, a bronze, silver, we will be getting a report card similar to what we received from the League of American Bicyclists as a bike-friendly community. So the next time, likely when we meet as a commission, that'll be the time where I'd like to sit down and kind of, as a commission, discuss the report card and address observations, ways for improvement, etc. So hopefully we get some good news, but it looks like it's going to be delayed just a little bit more. But and then the last one was the bike-friendly business applications. So a few months ago, myself and Commissioner Finn did meet to kind of hone in a little bit more on specific businesses that we want to target in the months ahead, as far as encouraging them to apply for a bike-friendly business. So I don't know if you wanted to speak about any more, Commissioner Finn, but that's something that's still ongoing, that within the next few months ahead, hopefully we'll have a couple applications submitted and hopefully hear some good news. But I don't know if there's anything you
My
wanted
job
to.
was asking hostile shops at church. So we have that in our back pocket
Yep.
right now.
Awesome. Any other comments, questions about the two staff updates?
There being no further business, the meeting is adjourned.
3:06.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.